Welcome back to 1.02, Dividing Whole Numbers, Another Way to Divide. Today our goal is to solve word problems using long division. To review, let's remember how to divide whole numbers. So this problem is 416 divided by 8. Remember that we're thinking about estimating here so that we can decide, okay, where do I start? So I'm going to think about 8 going into 400, okay? And I know that that's 50 something, okay, because 8 times 5 is 40. So if I tack on a 0, that's 400. So I'm going to start with a 5 above my 1, my 41. 5 times 8 is 40. So when I subtract, that's where the 16 comes from. Now I'm thinking about 8 going into 16, and I know that that goes into 16 2 times. That's actually perfectly 16, so 2 times 8 is 16. I have a remainder of 0. So my solution to this problem is 52. And one thing that's really cool about division is you can always check your work to make sure that you're right. So if I do 52 times 8, I should get 416. And I know that 8 times 5 is 40, plus 1, 416, my answer is correct. So when you're dividing in the real world, you have to think about what numbers actually represent. So remember in the last video, we talked about how your dividend is your total. Okay, it's always what you're dividing. Your divisor is the number of groups you're creating, and your answer is what goes in those groups. So for this one, a total of 196 pretzels are being packed into 15 bags so that each bag has the same number of pretzels. Compare this real-world situation to the worked out problem. So what I want you to see is that your total that you're starting with, that's what you're dividing. Okay, that's your dividend. And it's going into 15 bags. That's how you know what you're dividing by. That's your divisor. Okay, that's the number of groups you're making. So when you go through, you see that you can make 13 groups, okay, of pretzels. So 15 bags, 13 pretzels per bag. What does the remainder mean? That means that there's one left over, one pretzel. And we don't want to give it to anybody because, again, remember what they said, each bag has the same number of pretzels. So someone would just put that pretzel to the side and no one would receive that. Okay? Let's look at another scenario. So first of all, I want you to think about, does the remainder not matter, or sometimes doesn't matter? And it honestly just depends on what the problem is. So in our previous problem, we didn't really think about the remainder. We realized that's something that can't be divided equally, so we're just going to put it to the side. Okay? Sometimes you can ignore the remainder, but sometimes a remainder means you need to round up. Other times, the remainder is the answer to the problem. This is when you need to read every word problem carefully and read it several times if needed. So think about this. Suppose 2,468 people needed to be taken off an island by airplane. The plane being used to move the people can only hold 178 passengers. That means we have to take the number of people, and we're putting them in groups of 178 to decide how many trips am I going to have to take. Okay, so number of trips will be decided once I figure that out. Okay, so let's try this. 2,468 we're dividing that by 178. Okay. And if I think about maybe 200, okay, rounding that up to 200, rounding this to 2400, okay. I'm going to kind of come up here. 200 people times what? Okay, think about times 12. 2400. So let's start there. Okay, let's try 178 times 12. And I'm just doing some multiplying. That's 6, 13. Sorry, this is kind of messy. Okay, 2136. I do know that I can only make one group out of 246 out of 178, so I'm going to start there. That's 8. 3 minus 7 I can't do. That's 6. And I'm going to bring this down. So we can do it little by little, like I'm doing now, or you can think about 12. But I know that I'm going to be able to make more than 2 groups out of 178. I'm going to come over to the other side over here. Let's do times 3 and see what we get. That's 24. 21 plus 2, 23, 534. Let's see. I don't think I can make another group. Yep, that's too many. So 3. Again, that's 534. That's 4. 8 minus 3 is 5. Okay, here's what this means. If I take 13 trips, I'm going to still have 154 people left on the island. Therefore, I need to take one extra trip. And it's not going to be quite full, but I need to add a trip so that I can get everybody off. So 13 trips is going to get me most of my people, but 154 will be left. That means I need to take one extra trip. Okay? So you have to consider this scenario. Again, here, we don't have to put that pretzel in another bag. It doesn't say you must use all the pretzels. It just says you want all the bags to be the same. So 13 pretzels in each bag, 1 left over, that's okay. Here, we can't leave people on the island, so we do have to add on another trip. Okay? So let's look at this practice problem. Natalie has 350 pencils. She's packing them in boxes that each hold 14 pencils. How many boxes will Natalie fill with pencils? So again, we're going to take her total number of pencils. We are putting them in groups of 14 at a time. So 14, I'm thinking of 14. Let's start with 35. It can't go into 3, so I'm going to bump over. And I know that 14 can go into 35 2 times, I think. Let me just make sure. Yes, 3 times is too many. So that's 28. And that's 7 left over. Bring down my 0. And I know that 14 times 5 is actually 70. Here's what this means. Natalie will fill 25 boxes, and there will actually not be any pencils left over because my remainder was 0. So this one actually works out perfectly. Okay. Last practice problem. A company that makes play sets received 7,000 screws that they can divide up and ship out with each play set it sells. Each play set will ship with 131 screws. How many play sets can the company ship before ordering more screws? This question is super, so we have to answer this question and this one. how many screws will the company have left over after all those play sets are shipped out? So we're starting with 7,000 screws. Each play set gets 131, so we need to divide by 131. Okay. Thinking about 131, it is bigger than 7, bigger than 70. We're going to start with 700. Okay. I know 7 times will be too many. So let's think about times 6. I'm just doing some multiplication. 786, too many. So 131 times 5, 15, there we go. Okay, so 131 goes into 700 5 times. That's 655, so I need to subtract. And that's going to be 5 and 45 left over, bring down my 0. 131 times, I'm thinking times 3. Yep, if I added another 131, it would go over 450. So when I subtract this, I have 7 and 6 and 0. So here are my answers. 53 play sets can be shipped right away. Okay. There are 67 screws that can't be placed because they don't have enough for another play set. So how many screws will the company have left over? 67 little pieces left that they can't do anything with until they order some more parts. So this is your remainder, and that represents the number of screws left. This represents the number of play sets they can send off. Before you leave, make sure you can do the following. Solve word problems using long division. Thanks for watching.